This month's podcast with Dominic Pym, who's the co-founder of Ferocia and Up, Australia's first digital bank. The bank was founded in October 2018 and has already grown to 400,000 customers and taken on around $1 billion in deposits. The business has recently been sold to Bendigo and Adelaide Bank for about $116 million. And it was really good to see the insights from Dom around culture and people and a whole range of different topics. So I hope you enjoyed the show. It was a really good interview. Dom, do you want to start just by giving us a little bit of background about, just a brief background around the business and a bit of the history of how you got to here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so I start. My name's Dom, and I'm an Australian entrepreneur. I've been working in technology for about 25 years. In Australia, overseas. I lived in Singapore, I lived in South Korea, I worked in all over Asia, and lived and worked in Silicon Valley in the US and over in the UK. So sort of done all sorts of things. And most people know me as the co-founder of Up. And that's fine because Up is awesome. Right? Yep. But really Up is the culmination of decades of successes and failures. And so we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. And different startups that maybe some that we exited badly, some that we didn't exit, some that didn't work. But we've also had successes, products that worked really well, people that have gone on to amazing things, some companies that we've exited really well. So, that probably Up is a digital bank in Australia. It's the leading digital bank, and people say, oh yeah, that's Dom. He's one of the co-founders of Up. And that's true. But there's more to the story than that. So it's probably just that little bit of background just to understand. I'm a technology guy at heart. I come from I was a software engineer. And so I like to solve problems, whether they be cultural, whether they be product, whether they be customer-based problems with technology. How do you use technology to make things awesome, build a great customer experience, streamline things, improve processes, create efficiencies, make money, all that sort of stuff. How do you use technology and automation to do those things? That's really where my focus is. So that's sort of me in a nutshell. Hopefully that's a good intro.
No, that's great. So software engineering and that sort of stuff, programming, or what?
That's where I started. Yeah, that's where I started. And I worked with 47 of the Fortune 500 companies as a SAP consultant originally, and we were doing business process re-engineering, and we were doing software development on massive enterprise systems. So like one project, for example, operated in 170 countries, and it was probably a multi-billion-dollar project. That's how I sort of cut my teeth. That's where I started. And then after doing that for quite a while, I then joined a startup, which was, at the time we called it SAP Markets. It was actually part of the SAP group, which at the time was the second largest software company in the world. It was a spin-off, if you like, to help them innovate. So SAP were rated as something like 172 in the world or something by Gartner in e-commerce. They were number one or number two in enterprise software, but they were 100 and something in e-commerce. And our job was to take this new thing called the internet and move all the technology onto it and do online payments and all that sort of stuff, and create systems that would operate on the web. And the idea was to take SAP to number one. It took about 2.5 years, and then we. So that was sort of that was like how I cut my teeth, and I was the fifth person to join the organization in Asia, in Asia Pacific. We're based in Singapore, and then I moved to Palo Alto in the US in Silicon Valley, and by then we had 2,500 people. So it was very.
What year is this, Tom? What year is this?
I was in the 90s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah.
Okay. And so in terms of from there, what's the deciding moment for you where you decide you're going to go into business yourself and that you're an entrepreneur for you rather than consulting or employee?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because actually it probably even goes back further. When I first I was applying for positions, I when I was at university, I was looking at what are the great companies in the world that I want to work for. And at the time, Google didn't exist, for example. So it was a long time ago. The type of companies that we were looking at were IBM, Microsoft, Apple, SAP, Oracle, like what are the best technology companies in the world? And so I applied for all those companies. And the reason that SAP was attractive is because they were providing software for all the other companies that I wanted to work with, whether it was BHP or Woolies or, brands that I knew, and I thought I could, somehow make an impact. And then once I worked for SAP for about 7 years, I worked with all these Fortune 500s. I worked on all this innovative technology, amazing stuff. I really wanted to do something for myself in my own backyard. So after 7 years of traveling around the world, living and working in many different countries, I wanted to come back to Australia. So SAP actually relocated me back to Australia, and I helped to set up their technology, their engineering team here in Australia. And it was the first time that they had a local engineering team. So normally it was in Japan, the US, and Germany. And so this was the first time we set it up in Australia. I did that for a while, and then I thought, I'm going to let my hair down, and I started a record company. I left SAP and moved into a completely adjacent industry. And we did that for a few years. And what we ended up doing was building software so that musicians and bands could manage themselves. And we ended up with about 500, probably about 500 bands using that technology. And I realized that I was applying technology to a non-traditional technology business. And then very quickly, we realized that every company in the world is going to be a technology company. So why not use technology to solve problems? So rather than saying, I'm a technology company and therefore I'm doing technology for technology's sake, we started changing the narrative and saying, well, how can we help non-technology businesses implement technology to change the way they operate? And then going one step further, I ended up, getting a farm and moving back and having kids and all that sort of stuff. And so then you sort of think, okay, well, what do I want to get out of life? And it's really to help people. Like if I can, and I talk about people and planet, like if I can help the planet in some way, the community, the environment, and I can also help people to do their best, then I feel like I'm making a positive contribution to what I'm doing. And if I can use technology to do that, then it's like, that's just my dream job. That's like, I get out of bed in the morning and I think, how can I use technology to improve the world or to improve people's position in the world? Like that's just, it's amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it? And I mean, when we look at investments and that type of thing, I mean, every company these days is a tech company of some kind. Or that probably not tech companies. It's a bit like calling every industry that has delivery vans a logistics company. They're not. They're in whatever industry they're in. But technology, just like vehicles and things like that years ago, is the big enabler to become more efficient. If you're not using it, then you become a dinosaur pretty quickly, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for us, then it's like, what do we love doing? Problem solving. How do we use technology to solve problems? And those problems can be on a global scale, on a local scale, or just to solve problems for an individual. Sometimes it's maybe a startup founder, and they're they've got a great idea, but they don't know where to go with it or what to do with it. And so we spend a lot of time helping them choose the right technologies or develop the right technologies, to hopefully have an impact on an entire industry if we can.
Yeah, right. And from your perspective as an entrepreneur, what would you say is your biggest strength in business, and how does that help you succeed?
There's probably lots of things that come to mind, but the number one for me is the focus on people. So I have a lot of anecdotes around, someone that I recruited out of university or someone that I've worked with for 20 years. Like I've got one guy on our team at Up. He's been with me for 19 years through 5 different companies. And he's just off at the moment, he's off on paternity because they're having their first child. I feel like I've helped him to live his life, like buy a house, travel overseas, now have a baby. I feel like I'm making a positive contribution, and vice versa. He is being critical. He heads up our whole platform team now, right? So he's being critical to helping us deliver the change. And then I have other people that have gone off and won Oscars, and I remember Academy Awards or whatever, and I remember there's one guy that I bought him his first computer when he was fresh out of university in a regional town in Australia. And he moved to the big smoke, moved to Melbourne and all that. And so I just feel like having that positive impact on people. So the number one thing for me would be, if you have a focus on people, whether they're employees, whether they're business partners, whether they're customers, whatever they are, but if you have a focus on people and helping them live a better life, then that manifests in success. Because sort of success begets success. And on a granular level, on an atomic level, if each individual is successful, then you can create a culture that's successful, a team that's successful, and then you can create a business that's successful, and then that can impact an industry, and the industry can impact an economy. So I feel like you've got to go all the way back to sort of basics. So that's what I say number one. But the other one that's worthy of a mention is that my superpower is probably, lots of people are good with people, right? But my superpower is probably the convergence or the overlap between business and technology. So there's a lot of software engineers that are really good at their craft, but they don't know how to run a business, or they don't know how to raise capital, or they don't know how to manage legals, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm one of those unique, not entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs are like this, but I'm one of those unique people in a broader sense who has the business experience and acumen and the problem solving capability, as well as the engineering and technical aptitude. And I think that those two things together has probably been my personal biggest success, is being able to marry those two worlds. And then usually my business partners along the journey are the people that bring in other skills and that complement that. So yeah, I'd definitely say people is number one. And then for me, it's bringing together technology and business.
Yeah, that's really unique, because often in my experience meeting various entrepreneurs, they have one or the other. And to be able to have both is probably a luxury.
Well, the funny thing is that in one company, I'm the technical co-founder, and in another company, I'm the business co-founder. Right?
All right. Oh, that's interesting.
So like I'm very comfortable admitting that there's people better than me. Well, one of my philosophies is surround myself with people that are better than me, and you create a halo effect. You actually then end up with dozens of people all working together that maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to work together before if they come under a very strong leader who thinks they're better than everyone else. I'm quite humble in that regard. Like I know I'm good at some things, but there's people that are a million times better than me at everything. So if I can find those people, then we can really develop a culture of success and what my business partner calls elite performance. If we can create that sort of elite performing culture, then I think that the rest is sort of just it's just an outcome.
And that is amazing, because when people are given the opportunity, you get some surprising and great outcomes, right? And if they're never given the opportunity, because like you say, the leader thinks that they know best and it's sort of done by dictatorship, well, they never get to grow, and they end up moving on, and it's everyone's worse off for it. So if you can let people have that opportunity, more often than not, they'll take it and they'll reward you for it.
It's very rare in life that if you ask someone for help that they say no. And it's very rare in life if you give someone an employee potentially a challenge that they won't step up to it. Very rare. Most people are up for a challenge, and most people want to help, and all you have to do is ask.
Yeah, right. And in terms of the flip side of that, what would you say your biggest weakness is, and how have you overcome that in business?
I mean, people who would listen into this would probably laugh at what I'd say, but it'd be one of two things. It'd either be spreading myself too thin, or time management, which are probably related. I'm often so busy that it's hard to do everything, and yet I'm involved kind of in everything. I've got my finger in all the pies. So I feel like that's been my biggest weakness. In some ways, it's a strength. So when you are a founder of a startup and it's just you, and you haven't got your co-founders yet, you haven't got any employees, but that's actually an attribute, being able to work on all the different things. But it doesn't scale, and it doesn't last very long. By the time you get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people, you don't need to do all the things. And so that would be my biggest weakness, right up until exit of particular businesses, like even Up, for example. Recently, we've sold the Up business to Bendigo Bank. We've been working with Bendigo for a decade. So it was like an awesome way to sort of accelerate the growth of the business, is getting them to take an investment in the company. And that's amazing. But it also has freed me up, because now we have a CEO, a CFO, a chief operating officer. We've got all these amazing people that are doing all the things that, as a small business, and a co-founder, you kind of got to do all that stuff yourself. So I'd say that's my biggest weakness: spreading too thin, trying to do too many things. Yeah.
And how do you overcome that? Is that just by, as you get bigger, you recruit people to do the things that you can step back from?
Well, I think there's two parts to it. As what I was saying before, is surrounding yourself with people that are better than you, because then it's easy to say no. Like if someone's really awesome at something, like our CEO at Up is a million times better CEO than I could ever be. So why would I do that? Right. Just like I've recruited him in to do that. He's amazing. Like he's the best person at it. Now, actually, my business partner suggested to me, so we worked with Xavier about 15 years ago, maybe 12 years ago in our previous startup. And then he moved over to San Francisco to work with a small company you might have heard of, Square. And did really well over there. When he moved back to Australia, he came to Ferocia to work on Up, and he was just wanted to do some software development, really. And within a matter of weeks, he was already demonstrating those leadership skills that are just extraordinary. And so super intelligent, super experienced, has coached many, many founders and startup CEOs. So we just thought, like, why would my business partner do it? Or why would I do it? Like, why wouldn't we nominate Xavier to do it? And he basically did it for about 18 months, 12 months, 18 months in stealth in the background.
Okay,
Now, with the acquisition, he's been able to actually just take on the title as well. And now he's CEO, which is amazing. It's amazing for him and it's amazing for us, but he's just much better at that than me. So that's number one. Number two, I would say addressing it by having great business partners. So my business partner always said to me, you've got to be in bed before midnight. Don't try to solve everything yourself. Find people that are better than you. Let's build a culture together. You know, those sort of things.
Yeah, that's all good advice, right? That's
really great advice. I think having I always call it the yin and the yang, right? Like having the right business partner who's you're able to work together to create something. I think there's no better feeling than that. It's amazing.
Yeah, okay. And what would you say your best decision you've ever made is in business? I mean, it almost sounds like having come in with your new CEO sounds like it might be up there on the list. But what would you say, like, what sort of, if you think back over the course, it could even be something at the very start that, you know, everything snowballs, right, on top of each other and grows on the other thing. What would you say your best decision you ever made was? I
think that's right. I think there's no one best decision. The best decisions we made were to make decisions. Like by making a decision, like if you procrastinate or sort of pontificate and you never get anything done, you end up in perpetual cycles. So what we've always been really good at is making a decision, good or bad, doesn't matter. You make a decision and you stick by it, you implement it. When it goes wrong, you can try again, cut your losses, and you can learn something and you can improve on it. And when it goes right, you do it again. So I think that sort of iterative improvement philosophy, which is very commonplace in software nowadays, and people talk about agile and all that sort of stuff. But you know, if you apply that to business, I think that that it works really well. I will say this though. I would say about 15 years ago, myself and my business partner in Up, Tomo, we started Ferocia together. But before we started Ferocia together, we started another company together, and before that, we started another company together. Over those 15 years, we both took a punt on each other. I was the crazy entrepreneurial, eccentric technology, crazy sort of guy. And he was very experienced, 20 years older than me, been working in financial services for decades, had been a very successful sports AFL football coach. And so we were very different personalities. He took an enormous leap of faith, an enormous punt on me as a young sort of technology guru or whatever. And then I took an enormous punt on him as someone with all that experience. That decision put us in reasonably good stead. So you were just saying before that those decisions compound. If we hadn't decided to come together and to be joined at the hip and to back each other, then we wouldn't be where we are today. So I would say that, like all decisions, making a decision is the best.
I like that. I think that's really good. Yeah.
And then making the decision to partner with my co-founder and start 3 companies together and then end up here where we are now. That's got to be right up there with the best ever.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. And what about mistakes? I mean, everyone makes mistakes along the way. Is there any particular mistake that stands out? I mean, I think biggest mistakes, but also just, most important mistakes, because, like you say, when you make a decision, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Those mistakes, you learn from them, right? And sometimes the mistakes are more important than the good decisions. So is there any sort of mistake that you made along the way that was sort of
infinite,
an important one?
Infinite number of mistakes. I mean, more mistakes than successes. And I think that's actually what makes a success. The more times you can fail, the more you can learn. The biggest mistake I've made in my career, I can't speak on behalf of business partners or anyone else. The biggest mistake I've made is agreeing to sell our company to the wrong people. Like we sold one of our startups to the wrong company. We exited too early when we were just making an impact, and we sold it to Wally's. Like we sold it to the cultural mismatch. Cultural mismatch created all sorts of havoc. People lost their jobs. People quit. The product was never delivered. We lost market share. We ended up in court. I mean, all of that stuff was, and it was the best mistake I ever made, because I've learned how never to do that again. I've learned how to respect the due diligence process. I've learned how to be kind to people. I've learned how to leave something on the table for the next party. If you're going to exit, if you're doing a startup and you're going to exit, you get it to a certain point that you're very good and confident at getting it to, and then you leave something for the next guys, whether it's the venture capitalists, the private equities, whether it's M&A, whatever it is. I've learned a lot of things from that one mistake. And that one mistake cost us millions and millions of dollars, and it cost us months or even years of our lives. So it's a horrible,
that's traumatic,
mistake, right? Horrible mistake to have made, but really positive outcome.
Yeah, okay. No, that's interesting, because then, like you say, every time you go down that path, since then, that's high on the list of getting that right.
100%.
Because it is a traumatic experience. It takes mental energy, and it's that whole side of it is.
And one of the reasons that we sold the business to Bendigo Bank is that we started the business with Bendigo Bank. We've been working with them for a decade. We know them, we trust them, we love the work that they do in the community and the contribution they make to just society in general. And we know that they're ethical and they're morally aligned and all that sort of stuff. We could have sold the business to venture capitalists, private equity. We could have done M&A with some big technology companies or whatever, or big finance companies. But actually selling the business to Bendigo Bank, that was one of the best decisions we made. And it probably wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had that horrible negative experience, because the negative experience gave us something to check against. It gave us a benchmark. Is this the right decision? Are we doing it for the right reasons? Are we morally aligned? Is there an ethical alignment? Is there a cultural alignment? Those are the sort of questions you don't usually ask. The questions that founders, startup sort of participants usually ask is, what's in it for me? We didn't ask that question. We could have got potentially a lot more if we were asking what's in it for me. By asking what's in it for the customer, what's in it for the industry, how can we disrupt, how can we innovate, are we culturally aligned, are we morally aligned, are we ethically aligned? By asking those different questions, you get a different outcome. And that different outcome, I reckon, is awesome, because it's now going to accelerate the growth of Up. Up's already one of the fastest growing banks in Australia. And now we're going to accelerate that growth over the next few years, because we now have access to the people, the capital, the scale that we never had access to before.
Yeah, okay. So Bendigo Bank's now involved in Up specifically, because I note that you've exited the software side of the business.
So basically, the way it works is Bendigo basically bought Ferocia, and Ferocia was the software company that was building Up. But Up was always a joint venture. So Ferocia did two things. We did lots of things, but in the end, there were two things we were doing. One was that we worked with Bendigo Bank for a decade, building technology for their internet and mobile banking system. And then we also did a joint venture with them to do Up. And it was a 50-50 joint venture. So Bendigo provided capital banking services, all that sort of stuff, core banking system, blah, blah. And Ferocia provided people, capital, technology, ingenuity, all that sort of stuff. So we built the platform. So that joint venture went for about 4 years. And so really what Bendigo did was buy the other half of that by buying Ferocia. So now Ferocia operates as an independent, arm's length subsidiary of Bendigo Bank. And actually maintaining that distance and independence for Ferocia with all the same people, or most of the same people, it's an extraordinary outcome to have achieved. And we knew that Bendigo was the right partner because we'd already worked with them for 10 years.
Right. No, that's great. That's really good. It's not often you get a chance to actually do that in terms of, try before you buy, or in this case, maybe try before you sell. To be able to actually get a feel for what the business is like over 10 years. That's excellent. What would you say the best business advice you've ever been given is? And you had a few gems before that I really like from your business partner, so maybe it's one of those. But anything else that comes to mind, if you think what was the best advice you're ever given?
Again, there's probably quite a few things, but if I had to pick one, it would be focus on people and culture. Forget everything else. Everything, the product you're building, the impact you're having, everything else is an outcome. And again, I know I've given credit to Tomo along the journey, my business partner, but that was another one of his. He basically came as a footy coach, building a culture within a football team. And you do that over a decade. You don't do that over months or weeks. It takes a long time to build the right culture. And with Ferocia, we were able to build an extraordinary culture with an enormously high retention rate of people. We've got people that have been there for the full 10-year journey. The reason we were able to build such amazing products that people love, like Up is the most loved banking product in Australia by far. We do measurements, of how many people use the love heart emoji, or how many people use the word love in app store reviews, in social media, in public posts about their bank. And Up has got more of that than all the other banks combined, right? So people say, I never knew that I would love a bank. Or I never thought I could love a bank. Now, how does that happen? How do you create that kind of engagement with your customer? It actually manifests from the team, because the team love working with Ferocia, love working on Up, because the team is so passionate and the culture is so awesome. It actually leaks into the product, and the product then becomes loved by the customer because the employees love it and they love building it. And then we love our employees. And so that all comes back to building a culture of acceptance, diversity, creativity, innovation, tolerance, all of those things. So building a culture. Again, like I said, it's a nugget from Tomo and his experience in football. But if you apply that to a startup or a business and you get the culture right, everything else is an outcome. The product, the impact, the diversity, the passion, the love, all the different things as a consequence of the culture that you develop.
Yeah, I like that. And the sporting analogies really make sense, especially where someone's come from a sporting background, because successful teams are, in sport are such small, tight-knit groups. The impact of culture within a sporting team is so significant when it's on a small group. But it just extrapolates out to larger groups as businesses get bigger too. But I think that's underrated.
Yeah, well, it also manifests in many different ways. One of the simple ways that it manifests is in people actually sticking around. You don't have like a high turnover of people when they stick around. And when people stick around, then they also encourage other people to join. And so it helps you with recruitment and it helps you with retention, for example. But the other way it manifests, which there's lots of different ways, but one interesting way that sort of it manifests is that people actually left Ferocia to go and do something else and then came back. So we literally have 3 people who had worked with us previously, gone, done something else, and then come back again just because they missed it so much, because they loved it so much. And so I think that it's definitely, and it's easier said than done. Like it took us a decade to build that. Probably the first 3 or 4 years we're building it. And then the next 3 or 4 years we're solidifying it and getting things right. And then we got to a decade and then we sold. But we've kept the team together. We've kept that culture. We've kept the same people, most of the same people. So Tomo's left. And that's really sad in a way because Tomo was such a critical part of the culture. But his son, his eldest son, still works with the business. And he's our new cultural guru. He's our new sort of cultural leader. So I think that, it does manifest in many different ways. And recruitment is one, retention is one, product is another. It's an amazing feeling to be able to say, we created something and we created something that other people love.
Yeah, right. No, that's awesome. Very awesome. I've got 3 quick questions to finish off with. And the first one is, who's the business person that most inspires you and why?
I mean, the easy answer is Elon Musk or Bill Gates. It used to be Bill Gates for me when I was younger. And then now it's Elon Musk. That's the easy answer. There's probably more nuanced answers. Like Clay Christensen is the innovator's dilemma. He actually was mates with one of my mates who they both taught at Harvard together. And so, or not Harvard, Stanford. And so there was like a real connection and a relationship that I felt that you could read his books and you felt like you could implement it in your actual company, like you could actually implement those things. So I just felt like there was sort of a real connection there. But yeah, Elon Musk is he's my hero.
He's an amazing executing, isn't he, in terms of getting the different businesses he's got done until he tweets and then all the stock prices come down. But
I mean, he has his flaws as well. But I think that the things that I like is that there's an alignment of elite performance. I really like the focus on that. I like the areas that he operates in. So I'm a big fan of all the Tesla stuff. I've got the power wall and I got the solar panel for the roof and I got the car and all that sort of stuff. I really like that. And then I have a passion for space and space travel and space exploration. And he's obviously doing that. So I think like just the things that he does and the way that he's so successful at doing them, it's just inspiring.
It is. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And what would you say the best business book you've ever read is? That's
a good one. I've read some really great ones. I mean, the Innovator's Dilemma, as I mentioned, is a good one. But I think Good to Great and Built to Last, I think they'd probably be the most impactful business books that I've read. But my favorite is Forbes' Greatest Technology Stories. Like, it's a book that I recommend to everyone. It's a little bit outdated now. I don't think they've updated the editions.
But I think I've got that book.
Yeah, it's the origin stories of Hewlett-Packard and Microsoft and I don't know, other great, Compaq or Digital or whatever great companies in Silicon Valley. I read that book. I couldn't put it down. I've read it so many times. And again, it inspired me to do the things that I do. It inspired me to actually move to Silicon Valley. I lived in Palo Alto after I read that book. And I think that, like I said, it's probably a little bit out of date now because it doesn't have Google or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or Stripe or Square or any of those companies in it. But I think that it's so inspirational that if I had to choose one book, I'd probably choose that one.
Was there about 100 companies in that book that they covered?
I can't remember.
Sure.
I can't remember.
But I'm gonna have to go home and have a look at my bookshelf now. But that is, and it's quite old now, right?
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, real good little summaries of a bunch of businesses.
It's like the origin. It's like the Marvel universe, the Marvel extended universe, but for startups. And so it's like all the successful technology companies in the world. How did they start with two people in their mum's garage or something? Yeah. And it tells you those stories. And from the outside, especially when you're young and you're aspiring to that, from the outside, when you actually read those stories, the origin stories of the world's greatest companies, some of them now trillion-dollar companies, you look at that and you just say, oh my God, it can be done, and it can be done by one or two people.
Yeah, wherever you come from, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
Last question. What's your favorite quote on business, leadership, or life, and why? Favorite quote?
Yeah, I mean, a quote's probably a difficult one, but I've got a couple of thoughts. One is from my business partner. He always said to me, I've got two in mind, just when you asked the question. One is from Tomo. He always said to me, I don't agree with you, but I'll support you. Yeah, okay. I think that actually was the foundation of our 15-year relationship in business, because we wouldn't always agree with each other, but one of us would support the other one in making decisions. So that's not a quote per se. It's a quote. Tomo says it, right? But no one knows who Tomo is. But I think that's one that really has impacted my life. The other one is the motto of our primary school that we went to. So it was probably in Latin. I don't remember, but it was aspire higher. And it never left me, because it doesn't matter whether it's sport or whether it's family or whether it's friends or community, whether it's industry or whether it's a company. I'm always aspiring higher, always looking to disrupt, always looking to innovate, always looking to do better than everyone else, even if what already exists is amazing. So, for example, with Up, the big four banks in Australia have 85% market share. They have amongst the best digital apps in the world already. So you have to do, the bar is very high. You have to do something really magical and really exceptional, much better than Monzo or Revolut or N26 or Nubank or any of these amazing digital banks overseas. You've got to do something really exceptional in the Australian market. And for me, that encompasses, it embraces the concept of aspire higher. We've got to do better than the incumbents. And even though they're amongst the best in the world, we have to do better. And that always, and that's stuck with me since I was, 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, right. Oh, Dom, that's excellent. Thanks very much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. And some awesome insights on business. One day we might have to catch up again next year and do one more specifically around the future of banking and more on topic rather than just business in general, because I'd be really interested in your thoughts on where that's all going too. So maybe we look at that down the track. But
great. No,
thanks very much.
No, thank you.
Thanks
for having me on.
So that's the show for another month. I hope you enjoyed it. If you find it interesting, feel free to share it with family and friends, and we'll leave a review. Thanks again. See you next month.